So, good afternoon and welcome to the heck month is this? April 16th, Roads and Right of Ways Committee meeting. Originating from the trailer down on Pleasant Street. This is a hybrid meeting. Because we have a member attending via Zoom, we will do a roll call for all votes. And that includes taking attendance. So today we have Alan Reinhardt.
Here.
Lee Saperstein.
Here.
Rick Atherton.
Here.
Bill Smith.
Here.
Ed Gillum.
Here.
And Bill Greeter. We have Jeff Carlton from Natural Resources is here.
Yep.
In the room. This meeting is being recorded and will be available for future viewing on the town YouTube channel. Our first agenda item is to approve the minutes from February 20th, 2024.
What about March? I thought that we mentioned. No, I mean,
Do we do, I don't know if we did, did we do March previously?
no, March would be the
Did,
March was our last
if
meeting.
we had a meeting, I did it. If we didn't,
Oh, you know what? That's a typo on my part.
That's what I figured. Yeah,
So let's revisit.
so it's March 19th.
For the March, yeah, the March 24 meeting.
So
moved. March 19th.
Second.
And because we are doing a roll call,
Wait, can I ask Lee a question real quick?
yes, sir.
yeah, Ed, before you start, who moved, who seconded?
Alan and Rick.
Got it. Thank you. Ed, your turn.
Lee, you corrected that little bit I sent you, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And Wisconsin Civic Association is going to be joining us momentarily.
Yeah. Dee Dee Fowler lives in Surfside, Wisconsin.
Civic Association, Wisconsin, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to see you all.
Minutes. We didn't vote on the minutes.
No, we're going to do that now. I wanted to let her know that she was in. So motion's been made and seconded to accept those minutes. Ed Gillum,
Aye.
Bill Smith,
Aye.
Rick Atherton,
Aye.
Lee Saperstein,
Aye.
Alan Reinhardt,
Aye.
Bill Greeter, aye. Thank you.
Hi, I should know who you are, but from Wisconsin, you are Carol Greenberg. Hi, Carol.
Sorry. Thank you. Hi. Nice to see you.
There's a point for public comment for any items not included on the agenda. Carol, I'm going to bring your letter in since it's not on the agenda,
Great. Thank you.
okay? We'll do that after Jeff Carlson does a chapter 91 review in case he needs to go someplace else. He doesn't have to sit through the rest of the meeting. So that being said, Jeff, chapter 91.
Sure. So, when you guys had asked to come and talk about chapter 91, I know I feel like I've talked to all of you about chapter 91 many times before. So I never know what everyone wants to talk about, so I'll just do the real brief, kind of overview on what chapter 91 is really quickly. And then probably get into more of the meat and potatoes for what you guys are interested in. So obviously chapter 91 is one of the longer standing regulations within the Commonwealth related to public access, really focused on build and flow tidelands and navigable waters. The origin dates back to some of the colonial ordinances into the 1600s, and chapter 91 kind of was formalized in the late 1800s. So it's pretty old, and there are very few structures that can lay the claim that they predate all of the regulations for this. So The purpose of chapter 91 is to ensure essentially that the public has access and linkage from upland areas to these coastal resources, whether it's for shellfishing or fishing or back in the day, fowling was a lot more common. People could go duck hunting and that kind of thing that have gone on, but it's really focused now on how everybody can still get to the water and what it does. So any structure or activity that's going to potentially impede that access needs to apply for a chapter 91 license, or should be applying for a chapter 91 license. And part of that licensing process, there's a review for what public benefits are going to be provided in exchange for an impact to, an impact to that public resource. So classic examples that we like to give, because they can be pretty diverse. Everything from, docks. So if people have ever walked in Monomoy or Shimo and past Jimmy Stewart's Pier, there are stairs that you can go up and over during parts of the year, so you can maintain that lateral passage in that flow tideland area. To everything like the Dreamland is subject to a chapter 91 license. It's constructed on filled tidelands, and for their public benefit, they're required to maintain a public restroom for certain hours, and that's kind of changed through the years and gone back and forth a little bit, but that's what they've done in exchange. So it's pretty diverse in what those benefits can be. It doesn't have to be exclusive to a path to the waterway or stairs over a dock. It may be something that's a little different. And in cases where that public benefit can't be found, they do have the ability to do some level of kind of in lieu fee for that, but they try to really avoid that kind of at all costs. For what they've done, I'm just trying to keep really terse here. The thing that really drives Nantucket, and that's helpful for here, the document that can fuel the state decision-making process and public benefit for local municipalities is identified through our municipal harbor plan. So Nantucket is one of the, I want to say the state right now, I believe there are 11 approved municipal harbor plans. There aren't very many. People haven't taken them up. But that harbor plan that's crafted is a 10-year plan. It's adopted by the state. And then it's also adopted by your local select board or alderman or whoever are in charge of your town. They adopt that plan, and in there, your public benefits can be identified. So when you go and apply for a chapter 91 license, they're supposed to be first seeing if that application is within your mapped harbor plan area. If it is within that mapped area, they are supposed to try to address the needs and public uses identified in that plan first. And if there's not a need or use that's identified through that harbor plan for that project specifically, they kind of start through their checklist of state needs. So Phil is the vice chair of our current planning group for the harbor plan. And we're working on kind of updating that. So hopefully those 10-year snapshots give us a little better view in how we can update what our public benefit requirements would be for licensing. And kind of why that's important is we don't really have a lot of local control over chapter 91. This is something I know, feel like Rick and I have talked about till we were blue in the face many times, where the state issues these licenses and there are all these requirements and things that are need to be done. And the only folks that can really enforce those conditions are the waterways program at the state through Mass DEP. And at times, we've had issues through the years, whether it's accesses that get blocked, things don't get installed correctly, signage that doesn't go up, which happens quite a bit, that to get some level of enforcement, since it's all done through the state, can be difficult at best. Sometimes we hear things like, well, if you guys collect 8 or 10, we'll send someone down and we'll come take a look at all of them. And we say things back like, well, we're more than happy to send you pictures, whatever you guys want, to help expedite the process. We're happy to help. We're happy to be designated as, information collection agents for the state, however you would like to do it. And that's been met with really negative results to this point. We're going to keep it all in-house, but that's really kind of the quirks to chapter 91 for enforcement and kind of those purposes. To kind of step through the process a little bit, and then I'll just turn it over to questions, because I feel like that's probably more beneficial for this group. When you apply for a license as an individual, there's a basic application, state of paperwork. So there's basic stuff. And then there's very specific plans that have to go with, very specific formats that go in. That licensing process then gets reviewed and they issue a permit. And really what makes chapter 91 a fairly unique permitting process, it's not like an order of conditions from the Concom or, a Title V license for septic systems where DEP is the designated authority. Every chapter 91 license ultimately is signed by the governor and is issued. So the permitting times for chapter 91 are really long. So sometimes we've seen licenses that take anywhere from 8 to 14 months to get through the process. So it's not something that happens very quickly. For better or for worse sometimes. Sometimes it's finishes through DEP and then just sits in the pile and feel like some poor staffer probably sits there with the stamp and stamps them for a week when they get enough of them signed up. But we don't receive many licenses like that in the town where that's done. That license doesn't become active then until it's reported at the registry of deeds against each specific property. One of the kind of the gaps in information that we have is we do keep a register of all recorded licenses that have entered the registry of deeds, and we try to update that at least yearly. There's usually not too many per year. We kind of keep that in-house. But we don't really have a mechanism right now. There's not like an online portal that's helpful of any license that's been issued that wasn't recorded, that, got shoved in someone's file cabinet or a desk drawer, or got sent back to their surveyor who did the work. Someone didn't want to pay their bill, so the license is sitting in the file waiting to be, activated at some point. But they sit, and these licenses are also kind of interesting where if you don't record it, it never becomes active, so it just kind of goes away. But once it is recorded, some of these licenses have periods of 5 years up to 99. So one of the other challenges we've been seeing with chapter 91 licenses recently is this idea where we're doing a lot of coastal resiliency or coastal adaptation projects, and sea level is rising. And we're seeing lots of those different impacts that someone will have this license that's a third of the way through its life cycle, and the conditions under which that license has been issued are totally gone. They've either eroded away, the sea has risen enough where it's not really germane to the permit anymore, or in some cases, the primary use associated with that permit has been gone for 10 years. And this license is still just sitting active. And there's not really a really great way to update or deal with those right now, other than applying for a new license. So that's a really quick primer in chapter 91 in general. Apologies for going fast, but I wanted to make sure you guys have a busy agenda, but you guys have plenty of time for questions.
Is it me or are you guys frozen?
We're not frozen, are we?
I don't think we're frozen.
We don't feel frozen, we're moving around.
Yeah.
It may be me. I'm not sure whether I have to sign in again.
You look frozen on your screen, if that helps.
Well, he's over, he's
But we
he's
hear you.
across the big pond.
Oh, he is. Well, Lee is working on it, Jeff.
Sure.
Is it fair to say that if you go around the island and where a chapter 91 would be relevant, that not every parcel has a license?
Oh, absolutely. I would say there are probably more parcels than not that should have licenses that don't, than parcels do that should. Where you look at, kind of everything, and just to kind of run through downtown. If you were to draw a line essentially from the Brant Point Lighthouse and drew an arc kind of down Water Street through the Dreamland and then encapsulating the boat basin and all of that, all of those properties are partially or completely within the original Tidelands line and would require a license. And just even going down something like North Wharf, a lot of those residential structures don't have licenses. And frankly, never like to badmouth the state on record. No one has ever incentivized that coming into compliance. They ran an amnesty program at one point to try to catch up to that. But they haven't rerun it again. Sometimes it gets picked up when work is done, so if you were to do a substantial renovation to one of those properties, you might see it picked up then through the Conservation Commission process, because they have to send that notice into the state as well. And they'll get you need to apply for a Chapter 91 license, but there's no real mechanism where those folks are saying, you haven't applied for a license and you're actively doing work. You need to come into compliance. It's not, just for comparative purposes, it's not like a local conservation commission where there's enough local eyes and control on that to force someone to come in.
Jeff, what about ongoing places where there's a lot of projects going on? Let's say Easton, let's just use Easton. That's a collection of a lot of properties. And I know there is one Chapter 1 in the license that we're familiar with. There might be more going on down there, but you would think that there would be a number of triggers to Chapter 1 licenses by the activity that's going on there.
Yeah, and there's a lot of those lots, especially on places like Easton Street, where some properties have multiple licenses on that property. They'll, at one point, I can just think of a couple where they permitted and licensed a bulkhead. And then they came back and they permitted and licensed a dock. And then later in time, it's usually residential structures that get missed. Most of the stuff that's directly and clearly within that fill the flow tidelands gets picked up. But you'll see that kind of history over time where things got added over the last 50 or 60 years, where there'll be a bunch of individual licenses
Right.
for those structures. And if you're really lucky, you can find the ones that the requirements of those don't always mesh for what folks are supposed to be doing.
Well, our concern is in the future with perhaps a path that would go from Brant Point all the way to Monomoy is the public access,
Yeah.
along these places. And I know a lot of these licenses expire, and have expired for years perhaps, and some have been regenerated, some not, but
Yeah, depending on-
that's where we come in, I guess you could say, right?
Yeah, and I think it's a really interesting question where, how do you make Chapter 91 work for you, right? And how do you use the necessary licensing process to try to leverage a public benefit like a harbor walk, right? As I know we've all talked
Right.
about. Harbor walks for years and with
Right.
the land bank taking on significant portions of property along both Washington Street and the creeks and kind of coming around that. There's some real momentum for connecting some of those pieces together. I think the question is, how do you try to incentivize that through there? Because I'm not sure, and this is just me editorializing a little bit. I'm not sure that even if you included that as a goal within the municipal harbor plan, that you would get sufficient push enough to accomplish that, because unless people are doing work and are forced into licensing,
Mhm.
the odds of someone probably just being like, oh, I don't have a Chapter 91 license.
All right.
Let me put together the $15,000 application
Sure,
by the
yeah.
time I get my survey involved to just restrict my property when no one's making me do this right now.
Right.
Right, so it's
Yeah.
trying to find that balance, for what's there. Maybe there are some local options that we haven't explored.
And with coastal resilience, what we're licensing here may be further inland and someday anyway, so, it
Yeah,
might
and
be,
it's-
by the time it gets to fruition, it might be, we might be looking at the other side of Washington Street, not
It-
that.
It's
Yeah.
a question that we talk a lot about, especially at the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee, is as these areas change, right, and this is what we're talking about, you get these licenses that are of such a length and term where 10 years from now, that license was here and now we're here.
Right.
So does that license still apply, right? The world has changed around the license. How do we keep up? And how do you put in mechanisms to have someone update their license or update it regularly enough to kind of keep up with what the world is doing? And, to be perfectly frank, I think it's an area that the state hasn't figured out yet on how they want to deal with it as far as waterways and Chapter 91 licensing process goes. I know it's stuff that they also talk about. But obviously is, hot topic in areas like Boston where there's a lot of coastal development, walkways and public resources. For how those adaptations can change over time.
Didn't I read recently, I mean, I didn't dream it, so I know I read it, I just don't remember where the heck I read it. But I thought recently, I read something about, the enforcement ability of municipalities to deal with pedestrian restriction because of things that have been built out from a property. So for example, on Washington Street, the docks that come out or piers that come out or whatever. Currently, there's no way for the public to go from side one to side two. But I could have sworn I read something recently that said the municipalities had the ability to go to those impediments, if you will, and say, okay, you're required to have access up and down or over or whatever.
So we do occasionally look at it in, I'll use the heavy quotation fingers for voluntary compliance. I mean, we do even, the town and our office has sent out notices before that say, you're not in compliant with these regulations, please come into compliance, or we'll essentially tell the state that you're not in compliance, and then we'll deal with there. We've had anything from, blockages to, in some cases required signage that's supposed to be there, right? All these chapter 91 licenses for public accesses are supposed to have signage, and it's funny, you guys were talking about the roadway markers. We're having trouble with those, and they're much more stylish than the gross brown square signs for chapter 91 licenses, so.
So the most recent one that we've been involved with is the 44 to 46 Easton Street. And the response back from Frank Camarina
Mhm.
at DEP. The answers to the questions, the one was, was there gonna be signage, who is responsible for putting it up? And he said, the applicant, he actually included, actually, I can share it since I've got it.
Yeah, typically all of their licenses, the burden of putting the signage up is on the license holder.
Right.
So, this was the sign that he was, in his letter said that, had to be put up there. It's a 5-foot path from east end down to the water. But I didn't see anything in there about steps down onto the beach. So does that mean that this is just a viewing area that people go to and they, or is it?
So
Who does a requirement to add the steps?
this is a little bit of the gray area of chapter 91 is to add in something like steps, they would have to go through permitting. So there's a chance that they may have to include that in a permit with like the local conservation commission. And if it's within that area, is usually steps are outside of the areas that require chapter 91 licensing, even they're within that public access way. But they would still have to properly permit it. So it can vary, and it's one of those gaps where it's not really called out very clearly how to get there. Chapter 91 typically says you need to allow passage from, the point on the existing, travel right away, whether that's the improved road across your property to the beach. And then there's how do you get, down the 4-foot bank? What's there? Can people just, hurry scurry up and down it if they want to? Sometimes you see that. Do you need to permit stairs? And to be perfectly honest, one of the things that we also hear a lot from people in that very situation is they're also concerned about, well, who has maintenance requirements and liability requirements for maintaining stairs onto that beach? If someone trips and falls on those stairs, are they suing the homeowner at, 43 Easton Street, or who did they take action against? It's a question that comes up a lot. And I've heard varying answers on all of those things, and none of them seem to ever get a lot of traction. Kind of varies by the person.
So basically 44 would end up being a viewing area. where
Yeah.
People could go down and plunk down with a picnic basket and sit on the bulkhead,
Essentially,
much to the chagrin of the people that don't want the steps, so.
Yeah.
I mean, I would think they'd rather have them go down the steps and boogie down the beach, but.
Yes, sir.
What is the, let's say somebody is just bought a house on Easton Street and wants to do some work that would involve a bulkhead or whatever.
Mhm.
What is the pressure point? In other words, who is saying to him before you get a CO or, before, I mean, is there somebody in the town organization that essentially says you have to get a chapter 91 license if you don't have one already, or you have to update the one you already have? Is there somebody saying that? And if you don't do that, this is the consequences, or is it just sort of a thing we talk about and there's no teeth to anything?
So the answer to that is maybe. It depends. So the problem that you run into, right, is if I were to go buy a property on Easton Street that has a bulkhead, or any property that has a bulkhead, if there's not work that needs to be done with it, chapter 91 licenses, since they're recorded against the title, much like an order of conditions with the Concom, or any easements or other restrictions run with that property. So you would simply be assuming the responsibility for that license at purchase, if it exists. So in that case, if there's not immediate work that needs to be done, I would hope that whoever that person is using to deal with the closing or their legal representation is obviously, again, in a perfect world, saying, hey, you're buying this property, it's subject to these restrictions, here is the list of easements. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer what those are. I know that doesn't always happen, which is fair too, but that's kind of the first point there, right? If there's something that needs to happen, right? If you buy a property and you say, I need to do work and I need to replace the bulkhead because it's in bad shape. As soon as you come in for permitting, right, you're going in that case to more than likely just the local conservation commission. We always say, hey, when you apply for this, you're gonna mail into DEP. You're probably gonna have to notice Division of Marine Fisheries, you're gonna have to let Mass Waterways know. And you're also gonna be subject potentially to modifying or amending an existing chapter 91 license. Or if you don't have one, go get one. So there's that point that's there, and that might come to when you send in, I don't wanna bore people with permitting process. When you send in your application for a notice of intent with the state, they send you this little form letter back that gives you your SE 48 number that you see at the top, that you see all those little white signs all over town for that work that has it on there. But on that same form, there's a list of check boxes and it lists other places you need to contact to be sure you don't need permits. And sometimes it's chapter 91, sometimes it's a water quality certificate, sometimes it's something with like Mass Natural Heritage for endangered species work. But they'll tell you too, whether you take their advice, see each their own. And I think the other people that are usually involved in that too is folks that are hiring, a civil engineer. So someone like Art Gasparo or Nantucket Surveyors or Site Design or all those guys are hopefully saying at some point, hey, as we move through this project, you also need to get a chapter 91 license. And they're usually really good about it, also because it's more work for them. So if you need to get more permits, they're usually pretty reliable to let their clients know. Yeah. So,
So Jeff, this is Lee. It's a follow-on question. Do you have an opportunity to talk to the people in a group who are responsible for conveyances? That would be the realtors and the attorneys who do the bulk of the conveyances, where from time to time you can remind them of this checklist.
yeah, we have, I've done educational programs with, it's at the Nantucket Association of Real Estate Brokers, or NAREB, as they go by. The surveyors and engineers aren't really an issue. But really, it's very interesting because very rarely, do we have direct interaction with property owners. We usually are speaking to some sort of representative of some kind, just the nature of Nantucket. It's very different than, if you go to, Rockport, Mass. From a friend of mine who's their conservation agent up there. They have a lot of people that self-apply and do that work. Nantucket, I would say self-applications to the Concom are easily less than 5%. So, it's a little different, and I think, when you try to one size fits all a state regulation across the Commonwealth, you see those discrepancies get picked up in some spots more than others because you don't have that direct interaction. And that's where permits get forgotten about. To be perfectly honest, applying for a Chapter 91 license is a real hassle. It's a lot of work and can be really expensive. They're very specific about how their plans have to be set up and certain scales and line types and fonts. It's a really difficult process, and in my personal experience, the harder you make the process to get into, the less likely people are going to willingly do it.
It's like dealing with land court or something.
Yeah, and no one wants to deal with land court. It's
Yeah.
a total nightmare because it's there. And I understand the point of it, but it could be a more inviting process. And they've tried simplified licenses over time, but there's still permitting times are slow. No one wants to wait for 14 months to get an answer back. I mean, things cost money and time, that if you're gonna be willing to sit and wait for a year and a half to get an answer one way or another, or get told you need to make revisions and then come back, I mean, it's asking a lot, and there needs to be some better ways to deal with that process.
Rick?
So my guess is a lot of the Chapter 91s would be on property that would require a Conservation Commission review on whether they're on a pond or whether they're on the coast or wherever.
Yes.
On Nantucket. And as applications come into you, is there a check mark on the application that said, dear property owner, you may have an existing or you may need a new Chapter 91. And as part of this application, you must provide us a copy of that license if it exists. So just stop there for a moment. And then you would get, every time that's related, the license. Does that happen?
Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, and there's some reasons why it doesn't. Sometimes that license doesn't exist, obviously.
Right. I get that. But
Sometimes what we run into is the license isn't, germane to the application that they're putting forward to do work, which also can cause some wrinkles. We see a lot where what has happened and why it doesn't necessarily mean as much. It's kind of what we were talking about a little bit earlier. We've seen it more and more now with applications that come in for replacing things like bulkheads and groins, where when those were constructed and licensed, there was 200 feet of beach in front of that bulkhead and groin. And now they'll file their license and the water line is directly against that bulkhead. And
But just to follow up, if the question is fairly simple, do you have an existing license on the property? The guy is responsible for knowing that. And I don't know if there would be a reason he would be allowed to refuse to supply the license as part of the application process. Whether it's impacted by what he's doing is a second question, but you don't know until you have both with you. So I hear you about when, he's working up in the house 150 feet back and the license is only applicable to the shorefront. And he says, I'm not gonna supply it, but I would hope he'd supply it anyway, because you're asking him to supply any license against the property.
so in the Concom process specifically, we do require that people are supposed to file obviously their title. So whether it's land court or unrecorded or unregistered land. Land court's always nicer because you get that nice list of encumbrances where the license should be getting carried forward. Usually does, sometimes it doesn't always make it, depending on the time. We'll go through, obviously, we always compare our properties when they come into the list that we keep. And one of the reasons we keep it, but they're also supposed to provide any other permanent permits or licenses relative to that. So sometimes we chase them down, sometimes it's a matter of efficiency of time to say it's not needed, but in general, Nantucket, again, personal opinion, is missing a pretty significant amount of Chapter 91 licenses that we should probably have. Just in general.
These boards are overwhelmed too. I mean, have you ever sat through Concom meetings?
Look at the
You know,
agenda, you just say, oh my God.
I mean, the
It's the same way.
Ours
Concom,
isn't even close to the HTCs, but
No, but it's still,
It's
it's
a
a
lot.
lot going
and
on.
the Concom is, yeah, no.
no, it's not bad. It's just, it's also, it would be nice, the state has been telling us for a while that they're getting ready to put all of them in the searchable database online,
It'd be great.
but we're now like 48 months into, it's really close. So we're kind of waiting for that, because
So I remember with 46 Easton, I actually
Mhm.
got online and the guy Frank was very nice. He said, now, Mr. Atherton, push this button and do this and type this in on page whatever, and voila, it all came up. So they've got a mechanism,
yeah.
if you know enough how to follow, it's
Yeah.
not easy.
Or, you know, the
Yeah.
question I asked.
So Jeff, you have presumed my question, but I'll ask it anyhow. And that is, how do we get a readily accessible file on your page, the natural resources page, or somewhere in the town page, of all the licenses connected to addresses? And having asked that question, I will share with you my experience with mine reclamation permits, which are supposed to be viewable by the public, where the state was reluctant to make them too easy because they figured that people who didn't want the permit to pass would invade the website. So I do understand that there could be sensitivities about how much public information is available. And yet Rick points out that if we know the property and if we know whether it's recorded or registered, we should be able to find whether it's attached to the deed. It's a long question about how does the public find out?
Yeah, I mean, all of these are publicly available documents. Just some examples of spots where you can find them. Obviously, the Registry of Deeds, MassLandRecords.com, you can find them if you know how to find them. It can be a bit of a process. The last harbor plan had a pretty complete listing in the back with a little bit of a summary for all of them. We've always been on the fence about posting our list of the state licenses up somewhere, especially if we're only updating it once a year. I mean, I suppose we could probably put it up for what we're keeping. But I think there's a lot of choices that are there for people. So always can be more.
But we were talking, I know, having a roads and right of way folder on our website at the town. And it might say, chapter 91 licenses and list them by address if we have them. And even if we only have 5, we might post 5, they're public documents.
Yeah.
And that gets us started and you sort of carry on from there.
No.
And would you be supportive of that, or not that we're asking you to do the work? The volunteers might have to do the work,
Easy.
but would there be a problem, you think, with doing that?
I think the more you can make information available to people, the better in general, especially for things like this where most of the folks that have
Oh God, it's breaking up again.
very carefully is there's a certain public pressure if people are in compliance and other people are not in compliance. If people are aware and can see the ones that are and the ones that aren't, there's a little bit of a, public pressure to say, I'm in compliance, I'm following the rules, my signs are up. Or I guarantee you, like, it's amazing to me. The moment the Dreamland locks their bathrooms, the town gets a call, every time, for when they should be open. I swear there's some people that just wander downtown to go use the Dreamland for the bathroom, but the minute that they're closed, they call and they say, hey, the Dreamland bathrooms were locked. I know I'm supposed to be able to get in there. And then we end up contacting the Dreamland and doing that. We often say like, well, why didn't you just contact the Dreamland? Ask them why the bathrooms are closed. But, so there's a certain amount of that goes on, but people are aware of that, right? That one is a known commodity. They used to have the sign outside the building that said public restrooms for waterways license. The other one that we get a lot of questions about from time to time, as soon as like Great Harbor Yacht Club puts a chair in their walkway, just even if they're just cleaning or mowing grass, someone calls. They're like, I can't walk on the walkway because there's something in my way. And you're like, the guys mowing the grass moved the chair. They just, by the time we get there, it's out of the way again. But so there's a certain amount of that goes on for licenses that are known. So I do feel like that's always a good public pressure point to have. And these obviously apply, right? Not just to downtown or the harbor or Madigan Harbor, but there's a few in Hummock Pond, there's some in, some in and around Sacajah, so they apply to the Great Ponds as well. So there's, we can argue about ownership of Great Ponds at a different meeting at a different time. But, there is opportunity to kind of capture those.
But just, my sense, the Great Harbor Yacht Club is generally very good.
Yeah.
About that, that's a wonderful walkway and they're
Mhm.
there are no obstructions,
Smart.
No, that's one of the ones that we just have kind of a routine. We usually send a couple summer interns to make the walk. And just say, let us know if you get stopped, reported, we send our plainclothes guys out to make sure they don't get stopped because they started to recognize the rest of us staff wise for like.
Yeah.
well, you-
I've actually walked down that walkway when an event was going on. And so you walk right through the cocktail area and whatever else, and so they've been, so far, they haven't said, hey, you interloper, what are you doing here?
You're right. That's right.
But no, chapter 91's an interesting challenge at times, but it's definitely a really great tool within the Commonwealth that we have.
Well, we're working with Maureen to reconfigure our a really stale webpage.
Yep.
And so the first thing she did was, we didn't realize we couldn't find some stuff, and so she's now got a link. It's gonna be moved around, but currently it's on there, and it has the link to the microfiche archives that Captain Stover started doing. And the other thing that's hidden, even on the town main website, is the link to the archives of all the other departments. So, our plan is to take that and just make it more user friendly. Instead of having stuff scroll away in the corner, put it up front, redo some of the titles. And then have some folders so that people have to go in the treasure hunt to find something. So when we get to the point of trying to do 91 stuff, we'll be reaching out to get your ideas and stuff.
Definitely. Well, I think, even basic first steps is, I know updated lists will get published in the Harbor Plan, which will hopefully be in front of everyone for public review and hopeful adoption, in the next few months.
Nice.
Knock on wood.
I like that.
Depends how fast the committee goes, but that's, they'll hopefully be there. And I think that's always a good start where you have that kind of that list of what's active and someone that's put that together. They're not hard to find when you have that list. And once you get it kind of up to date, you're not adding 100 a year. It's like 2. So it's not a heavy lift to put forward. And I agree, like the Laserfish archives can be kind of cumbersome to go through. And if you don't know which, we wanted for a while, say there's a few of us in the town that have sections that are there, like all of the Concom files are available on that archive. We've always kind of wanted more to have the ability, even if it doesn't have to be linked to the GIS, because that would be a lot to ask, but to have all of the files by map and parcel somewhere too, so you don't have to say, all right, I want to get the Board of Health parcel for, map 1, parcel 1. So I want to go through and pull them all out. Oh, I need the Concom one now. I'm gonna go find there. Like, I want to be able to click on map 1, parcel 1, click it and see that it says health, Concom, HDC, chapter 9, like whatever is there.
Perfect.
And I can do it all at once. But I know we've been talking about that with the folks that set that up, the Laserfish. It creates some mild panic. But I feel like we'll get there at some point, but I would say if that's something where if you guys are working with them. If that's something that interests you to be supportive of that idea too, to say, we need to organize not just by department, but. I want to be able to pick my property and look for everything and not have to go to 8 different spots to find it.
So the document might be in it, but as long as you have links
Yeah.
Right.
to a by address list or something like
Yeah.
that.
That would be perfect.
Computers are really smart at sorting data, I'm told, so
So our
Okay.
role is advisory to the
Artificial
select board,
intelligence is
right?
coming to help out.
So if we give advice to the select board as far as adopting a program such as that.
Right.
Seems as though that would be one route we could take to,
Well, we've garnered some support in that respect, because Maureen was very appreciative of us wanting to do something. And, so she came up with an idea of being able to share files back and forth to get them ready to publish, but we ran into a glitch where we shared a document back and forth, but then she updated something and I couldn't see the update, so we're revamping and we're gonna come up with another way, but once we have something as a template that works, then we'll sit down and draft up some different ideas of what the content should look like. And
I might suggest, I'm not sure if he's the right guy, but he can point you at the right guy. If it's questioned, especially about the Laserfish, talking to Mike Alvarez,
It's the DP
he's the
process.
CTO for the town,
Oh,
and they've set it up. And I don't know who manages that system internally for them now, that Maureen like feeds information into. But I know they are more of the like keepers of the back end of all of that stuff. They may be able to help inform that conversation about how easy that may or may not be. For all I know is they have like a checkbox they could like check off and be like,
Yeah.
we're done. They just don't know, so, it may not be Mike, it may be someone in his office that is helping manage that, but. He would definitely be a really great resource for that.
so anyhow, so that's where we're chugging along slowly.
You guys might be, the next chapter 91 license getting issued, so. They're
Okay,
not that bad.
well, thanks
Thank you.
for
No problem, anytime. If you guys got any other questions, I'm always happy to come, especially as long as we're here right next door.
perfect.
Talk about the Baxter Road paths to the ocean with the private signs. No,
I think, as I said earlier, I think we as a committee ought to go and view that and then decide what we may want to do or may not want to do.
Right. Just to bring you up to speed, Jeff, what happened was, and I'm sure at some point Concom got roped into the process, but the Wisconsin Civic Association, which Cal Greenberg is actually on representing them. They wanted to update the welcome signage at each end, and so they wanted to change the verbiage, and we went through that. And the sign review committee got involved, and the DPW went out and installed and stuff. But in that process, we've done several small sidewalks, and what Phil is talking about is us actually posting one so that everybody can go at once from the group. But in our walks, and in talking with Carol, we said, yeah, we're gonna come out and do the walk and stuff and identify encroachments, because it's encroachments on both sides of, over the years have happened with the paths meandered onto people's property, and then people either knowingly or unknowingly have pushed their lawns to Spain across the town property. And so, and once you start to identify the encroachments, it's identified, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. And so also in that process, we talked about, we reviewed your memo from 1822 or whatever, when you did the look at all of the steps. It wasn't quite that long ago, but it seems it.
2015.
Yeah.
Are these all of the steps that people have
About
built to
10
go,
years ago, right?
that goes down to the water?
Yeah,
And they all have little signs that say private on them?
a lot of them do. I think the bigger question that comes with those isn't how they're necessarily marking those, but most of them cross town property and should probably be licensed by the town.
Well, also in the doc that we found, they are supposed to be designated as public.
Yeah.
And so, we've taken pictures and probably 90% of them are designated private. Carol's on about another issue we're gonna be talking about. And I'm sure, the other thing that Ed is working on is trying to identify the street address with where the steps are, or where the encroachments are.
Yeah.
And then.
Property by property, basically.
Yeah, and then once
Some people
that's done,
Put on a
we'll be able to do a
private.
helicopter kind of look at it and say, okay, here's an issue that the town needs to square away, and here's an issue that the property owner needs to square away.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my end and what I've seen historically, I think especially in your role as advisory to the select board, sitting down and having them kind of renegotiate licenses for those crossing the town property and figuring out which areas are most appropriate, or if all of them are for public access, and how the, maintenance and liability issues are addressed, because I think all of those can be done through licensing, and then it's just a matter of like staying on top of the license so they don't expire again, and
Yeah.
they fall into the abyss of no one remembers that we even need a license, or a lot of those properties have changed hands sometimes, and people forget or don't know. But I think that there are ways to do that, whether it gets recorded on the property or not for that license,
Yeah.
however it would work, but.
That's our intent, is to gather the information, so when we go in to sit down, it isn't like, well, we think this, or we surmise this, or whatever. We wanna be able to say, we looked at it and this is what we see.
Yeah.
And this is what our recommendation would be, and then it's up to them to decide, obviously, whether they do it or not.
Yeah.
So we didn't wanna go in and be turned away right away and say, well, you don't, give us some details. So we're trying to get that first.
And we're also trying to do it in a way that doesn't, part of the challenge with the bluff path has just been over loved, so to speak. There's too many people using it, and a lot of people using it improperly, using it at different hours that are improper. And we don't want to attract any further attention to particularly these public steps, because, that just adds another element of
Interestingly
attraction.
enough, I had the opportunity to go talk to the Wisconsin Civic League last summer. Not about stairs or even about geotubes, just about some coastal issues in general, nothing too controversial. And the first part of their meeting, and it was interesting, is their Civic League has great attendance. They filled Wisconsin Casino pretty much from front to back with people, right? It's a Wisconsin group and the Manicat group are probably the two most attended ones. So they were there, and the bluff walk was the topic of conversation for a good, I'd say a good half hour to 45 minutes. And a lot of the same concerns where it's, they like the fact that there's this great public resource, but there's also a level of, respect and stewardship that needs to come with everybody that's going to utilize that resource. And that wasn't happening. Hopefully things have gotten better, but I think, right, identifying the correct spots for people to go on and off and having things marked clearly, and making sure that all those things are properly addressed, I think would be helpful for everybody.
The rules of the path.
Right.
That's
And it's
one thing
also-
that we really worked on.
And it's also super helpful for, you know, when some poor CSO or even worse, if some uniformed officer has to go out there to solve a problem. If it's not clear or something that's there, that creates a kind of a, you know, sticky wicket for those guys where they're trying to figure out how to mediate a situation that someone says, well, it was very unclear to me.
Yeah.
And you
It's
get
even-
adversarial points.
It's even getting a little funkier because one of the folks on the Bluff Walk felt that the path had migrated onto the property. And she did a survey and so they've got these, if you go out there now, there's these little yellow, they're not reflective, but they're sort of like yellow stone markers or whatever along the property line, and you can clearly see where the path has
Yeah.
meandered over. And in order to correct that, obviously, it's gotta be shifted a bit. And so to do that without the DPW involved, it's gonna be impossible because growth has come in and whatever, so it's gonna, as we told Carol and her predecessor. It's not something that's gonna be magically fixed. There's gonna be some angst on both sides trying to do it. But they brought it to our attention and we're just gonna do what we can.
And a lot of that too, right, as soon as you start clearing vegetation at the top, well, now you need to have permits. And
Yeah.
those aren't always the easiest to get
Yeah.
for better or for worse, for stuff like that, so. Again, I think it's a real opportunity where, you know, the select board has some ability to say. We're using town-owned land below, whether it's for coastal protection, or for access with stairs. We need to balance the scales out a little bit too. How do we work collectively to do that and in a clear way? So in 5 years, we're not like, well, what were we talking about? Right? 'Cause everyone knows what the steps are, where the, you know, the information is kept. Who makes decisions and judgments through their brains. Setting up that procedure, I think, would be really helpful.
And we've also done a couple of those. It's gotta be a liability issue. Because the steps haven't been maintained. They're falling apart, and if somebody goes down onto those, if it's town property. You know,
Yeah,
then the town's got a liability, so if that's the case, then. The ability to get to that needs to go away so that doesn't happen, so.
Not to put too sharp a point on it, but you go to the town website for Roads and Right-of-Way Committee. Our mission is, I mean, this is squarely in our thing. Our mission is the committee is to review any issues concerning the status of access over public and private roads, rights of way, abutters ways, proprietors roads, footpaths, and any other ways throughout Nantucket Town and County, and to make recommendations to the Board of the Selectmen. This is clearly our job.
Exactly.
And I think this is clearly our responsibility to make sense of this whole thing
Yep.
and make sense of it with the Wisconsin people. So we're not creating a problem, but addressing the fact that there's a public and a private aspect to this whole thing.
May I, Bill?
Yeah,
I
go
just
ahead.
want to say that we are well aware of this issue, as Jeff indicated, took over much of our meeting. We have people, the residents, as you know, who are upset. We have this situation with the stairs, with Bill and I have discussed. And one thing I think Jeff alluded to was that we don't want to create, we want to do this very carefully, because creating these private public access to the beach, and now we'll have people walking with their beach towels and their chairs. Can you imagine on the bluff path looking for access to the beach? As it is now, our new signs say no bikes. We have bike riders. You know, no running. We have runners. Please don't go on people's, you know, lawns, and they're doing yoga on their lawns. So we're doing the best we can. And if you inform me, I can inform our organization. We have 3 community service officers each summer, And we do chat with them and ask them to keep an eye out where they can to help our visitors behave. So thank you.
The land bank has to deal with this too, don't they?
Jeff, we need to bail. We'll keep checking them.
Sure, I'll hop out again. I'm always happy to come back.
Thank you, Jeff.
Or if
Okay,
you're ever
thanks,
looking
Jeff.
for me, I live in that.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Good luck with the rest of the agenda.
Yeah. So while Carol's here, we're gonna skip over the Bunker Hill discussion for a second. And so Carol sent across a letter that I'm gonna bring up here. In 1 second. Get it together. There we go.
Bill, this is Lee.
Yeah,
I've had problems with connection. So to make sure that the minutes are accurate, would you check with Haley Cook to get the video up just as soon as she can?
yeah, sure,
I'm out tomorrow, but I might be able to work on them on Friday.
absolutely. And our guest, Jeff, just left the meeting just now for your notation. So this is a letter that Carol sent,
Didn't read that.
and she's been working with the DPW. And then one of the things that they've been looking at is some safety issues, and I'll scroll down. So there's markers that have now grown. Actually, they haven't grown. The land below them has gone away, eroded away. And so they're tripping points or hazard points. And I'll let Carol speak, but I just wanted to show these first. And one of the suggestions, I think, from Drew, from DPW was to move those and get rid of them, get rid of the walking point, the tripping point. And our immediate concern is going to be maintaining the fact that that it's a noted public way. So, you know, there's various ways that this can be addressed, but I don't think any of us are going to jump up and down to support removing them. But I'll let the troops speak. And Carol, would you like to walk us through whatever?
Sure. So, excuse me. One of our board members went out to take a picture of our new signage that the DPW installed. And right by one of those signs is the marker on the ground you saw. And he said, this is a safety hazard. So I sent the pictures to Drew. Drew took a ride out there and he saw them for himself. Those photos that you see are from Drew Patnoid, director of the DPW. He is suggesting it be removed, and I asked him if he would wait. I wanted to loop in Bill and your committee before we did that. Yes, you could see it's right by our new sign. Bill, I did want to mention, you know, you are, when I walked through with you and Alan last summer, you talked about these, I guess, I don't know what they're made of, cement or granite, these markers that ran vertical instead of, because I'm concerned if Drew fills this in, it's just going to happen again by next season. But so I just wanted to bring it to your attention and what you think your committee thinks the correct thing would be to do here.
Part of the discussion is going to be if in fact the idea is to put in vertical ones, you know, where do we get them? Because the ones that we have all been used. And so that's something we'll have to have a discussion at some point with the DPW to see if they're going to be able to pull money out of their budget to deal with it or what, because we don't have funds for paper.
Well, This particular sign is right by our new sign,
Oh, yeah, yeah. but I'm talking
which
about-
indicates indicates it's a public way. So is it necessary to have that on the ground as well?
That particular one might not be, but,
Maybe not that particular one, but
but yeah.
Yeah, and it's possible to move those. I mean, as I said, I put all of those flush ones in with a shovel and, you know, little hand space, so. It is possible to move them so they're not directly in the path. When I put them in, I thought, well, we'll put them right in the path, and they lasted for a number of years. And
yeah, is it Bill?
Move.
How many years have they been in there, Alan? How many years ago did you put those in?
And
Just curious.
I would say at least 5, 6, 7 years.
No, I think it was
I think-
probably closer to when you did the 2015
I
thing.
think it's
So
longer than that.
it would have been
Yeah,
probably around 8 or 9 years anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's been at least a good 10 years.
You did the t-
Bill?
I'm really against removing them completely.
I agree.
I think that maybe we're, for that one location where you have the sign
It's redundant.
at the beginning of the walk, you can, you could remove that one. But I think if anything, the problem is there is less it's not really obvious without these items in the ground. It's not obvious that the public knows that they're in a public way. And I don't think we should make it any more mysterious that they are or they are not.
Phil, this is Lee, and I agree with you completely. Yes, for Tripping Point, I am a consultant to the Mine Safety Research Agency on safety, so I'm sensitive to tripping. But it seems to me that Alan's point that it could be moved a foot or two left or right, so it's not in the pathway, and simply reset it. Carol, they went in place after the town took those cross paths to ensure that they were public access, and we felt it was very critical that they be so marked.
That was 2015.
I don't have a problem with any of them, as you know, or as Bill and Alan know. This particular one is dangerous. And this is the only one that I'm bringing to your attention. I'm not sure which way you can move that. We'd have to go out, or I could ask Drew to take a look and see where he could move it. If you move it to the left, it could be on someone's property. I don't know. And to the right, you have the, I don't know if there's much room there.
They're not that big, and they can be turned sideways.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
about-
Okay, that's a good idea.
Are these things marking a perpendicular path as well, or just the path itself?
No, it's that
Right in
they're
the
at,
middle of the path.
Well, I know, but they're just directing the path. They're not, so they could be moved 6 feet forward or something,
Yeah.
right?
yeah, no,
My,
Ed, they're at the end of all the laterals from Baxter to the
Well,
footpath.
that's what I was asking about. Do they think?
well, there are a couple of places. They're right in the path themselves, and they're at laterals.
Okay,
So
the
my.
laterals are critical.
Right, so my suggestion would be to eliminate, because it's not just this particular one, there's 2 or 3 here that that are raised up, there's another one. So my particular suggestion would be, the immediate remedy is that the trip part gets eliminated by filling in around it while we come up with a course of action. And it can be researched to see, okay, which ones are movable, which direction can they go in? Are there some that can come out in a horizontal, a vertical one go in, whatever, but I think the immediate concern is the safety thing, and the quickest way is to just eliminate the thing and put Phil in it. Not you, Phil, but the other. Phil.
Hey, Bill, my first laboring job in the mine was with something called an idiot stick. which technically is a number 2 round point shovel. It doesn't take a lot to dig it out and just move it sideways.
Exactly.
But a question with the maintenance of the path itself, and this is a DPW question perhaps. Obviously, the path's eroding, then the more and more people walk on it and it erodes.
Exactly.
Do they ever like maintain the raising of the path a little bit itself as part of the maintenance? Is that,
I don't think it's been done. To me, it looks like it just, the paths are getting deeper
was
because
it someday gonna be like a
Getting
foot,
like dirt roads
a
with
foot
sides.
deeper, or is it gonna be like ever
it's
raised back up? That's what I mean. It
Yeah.
might be also a maintenance issue of the path itself.
it's like going out Red Barn Road where the sides have gotten up.
I don't think it's that big a deal.
Yeah.
I think the main thing is,
It is
get this one thing out of
Yeah.
the way.
That's
And,
redundant
and
anyway.
don't throw it away for God's sakes, because then we'll say, well, where did it go?
Yeah,
You know,
exactly. If I can comment on that, I'll be out there before the weekend and I will take care of whatever ones that are trip hazards. I will take care of those myself, I promise.
There we go.
I have-
lucky to have you on the case.
There we go.
Well, I mean,
Okay,
you know,
so-
it's just,
Though it is redundant, this
By
particular
the
one right
way,
next
you
to
know,
the
we
side,
had
unless it's a lateral.
additional of those markers that disappeared. They were behind 4 fairgrounds and they disappeared. And that's why there are some of those ways that don't have one, because we were gonna put one on the Baxter roadside and the others so on, so.
Maybe this one could be, if it's not on a lateral marking, it could be moved to one of those places we need one.
Colleagues, Ed asks a very good question. Whether or not we should be putting some kind of soft fill into the walkway. For example, if you go into Tuppence out of the parking lot, there's shredded bark or whatever, not compost, but pine bark or shred. And it makes a nice walking surface and it would fill in the groove that's being formed.
So, all right, why don't we, we'll reach out to Drew and see what,
I'll take a look and I'll report back to you.
okay,
And you can alert the committee as to what opinion or.
so black smoke from the chimney is one thing
And we need to post like.
And I still think we as a committee should together
Oh, absolutely.
post it or whatever you need to do, go and walk the whole damn thing and then come back and decide what action or inaction needs to be done.
That way more than 3 of us or 4 of us can go.
So what I'll do is I'll send out a doodle request to the members
Okay,
for your availability.
Yeah.
And everybody done a doodle?
I don't do
Okay.
it.
I don't think they're-
I'll figure it
It's
out.
Plug you in and it'll plug your
It's
answer.
simple.
Never done it.
Well, we'll put up some dates and see when we
Right.
get the most.
Exactly.
And then we'll have to publicize it. Carol?
Just so I'm clear, Alan, you're going to take care of removing this particular, it just would be great if we do it before Daffy weekend when people are gonna be
Yes.
walking.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm gonna let Drew know, because we've been back and forth, that you're gonna take care of that, and I'll just let him know about the discussion of the committee. I'm there the week of the 8th, if that's gonna be the week you're gonna take a walk. I'd really like to join you if you do,
Well,
go that
It's gonna
way.
it's gonna be a posted event, so,
Um,
we'll have to put an extra boat at the Highline to bring everybody over that wants to go on the walk. but-
yeah, but,
That'd be
Bill, just a
fun.
just a regulatory issue. The rules are if this is a field trip, it does not need to be posted and it does not need to be thought of as a meeting in contravention of the open meeting law. However, no discussion should be held and no conclusions reached. Cemetery Commission did this recently. I took notes and the notes were presented at a formal meeting, and that's when we had the discussion.
That's,
And the Concom takes.
We might want to talk as we go.
yeah, well, no, I mean, no, I think we just, I think it's a field trip. It's a field trip. And then we come back and decide how we want to go forward.
All right, so I'll send out a thing and get availability.
Well, we'll let Carol know so she can, be the tour guide.
And she can.
Thank you. I just want, I actually want to protect all of you from the residents on the bluff.
Well, I actually, when I walked it today, I said, gee, I wish I had a shirt that said Roads and Right of Way Committee, so I didn't get accosted. But we're still early in the season.
So Alan, how heavy are these little things to pick up?
They're not that heavy.
Good.
They're.
Okay, because I don't want you to have a see out.
All right. Well, I'll
So,
send out a-
one last question, Alan, you had,
will do an artificial
Carol has
survey
it.
and I will report back. to
Okay.
Fairbanks.
just,
Carol has
so
And-
Alan, you have
Any
dirt to, Alan, you have dirt to fill in the hole? I guess they're not that deep.
From adjoining properties.
I mean,
Sconset dirt.
I think that the land right next to it has a newly sodded lawn, so you could just.
We'll say Carol said it was
okay, thank
okay.
you.
Bring a mannequin there.
Now there'll be a hole. Oh, my God.
We'll get the mannequin people excited.
Maybe I'll bring a
That's it.
picnic with me. so-
That's not at a that's not at a lateral. Is that clear? I mean,
This
that's
isn't
just,
allowed.
that's just a line, yeah.
All right, so Carol, we'll get back to you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks
So
for
appreciate
joining
it.
We'll move on to the discussion of, at one point, we talked about, Bunker Hill Road, being added to the public, takings list and whatever. But I sent out that update that I got from Drew of all the identified public streets now. That spreadsheet. And Bunker Hill is actually already on that list as taken as a public road. The other thing that I noticed, because we'd had a conversation in our meeting at one point about Pilgrim. And so when you look at the GPS that Nathan has done of the different roads, Pilgrim shows public stem to stern. But I didn't see it on the spreadsheet. So I went back to Drew and asked for clarification. And he said anything that was not on that spreadsheet had been looked at and deemed private.
Right.
So,
And now they have the signs at both ends.
so, yeah, and I told him that,
Well, they're
that's
new.
why we were looking at it.
Right.
And so,
Could be a future.
I guess they're gonna Nathan was gonna be doing an update to his maps probably in this month or whatever, and that's something for him to change from that overview.
Just as a comment on that, the land bank looked at, so we considered some properties in that area. And there's a long sort of history up there as far as real estate and what's public and private and all that sort of thing. The main thing is the development that's happening up there. I mean, it's just,
Tremendous, yeah, right.
it's totally changed, like what's going on up there, so.
And the fact that it has now has sewer in the road, never had sewer for
Yeah.
a number of years. A lot of it put in privately and whatnot as well. So, yeah.
Bill,
I-
I think I didn't report back to the committee. I think I spoke to you directly about my conversation with Nathan Porter.
Remember
And so Lee, you could get this into the minutes. After our last meeting where I volunteered to talk to Nathan about trying to compare what he had on the GIS maps with what DPW has. And Nathan told me at that time, when we spoke, that he is updating his GIS maps, and that he is also going to send me what the DPW has on their maps and that we are going to compare the two.
Well, I sent you, I don't know if you received it. Did you receive the spreadsheet of accepted roads? Check your,
Yeah, okay, I think I did. And then what we need to do is match that up against what Nathan has.
so that list.
So that's the piece of work that needs to be
Right,
done.
and so that list is, Drew said that was just recently updated.
Okay,
So
so we
that-
need to, we need to match the
Yeah.
two up and see what Nathan has
So
to.
that's the latest and greatest.
Okay, well, that's where we are then.
Yeah, and from what he was saying is when they get new roads in for developments and stuff, they are adding them to that list.
Okay.
So going forward, that would.
Well,
be-
I think it's important that Nathan be able to update so everybody is on the same wavelength.
Yeah,
I
oh,
agree.
absolutely.
In the question of Pilgrim Road, it's clearly obviously been debated and now someone's taking it on themselves. I don't know who put the sign up saying on both ends, but obviously someone did. It'd be interesting because it does fit all the requirements of a public road. And then as we go forward more and more, it's going to fit more of the requirements, such as the private portion, perhaps a Wind Street. We might want to do some mechanism, find out whether the people that live on Pilgrim Road want it to be a public road or not. I know there are a certain number of them would love it to be graded by the town and not the way it is. And there's others that like the dirt road, Squam Road kind of, keep them coming out kind of thing and not a cut through. So it'd be interesting that somehow or another bring. the
Well,
residents into-
that's actually one of the checkoff items.
Right.
Of,
Yeah.
do we as a committee recommend it being converted from a private to a public road? Is there community opinion on it?
Right.
And if there's not, what,
Right. And
we
we
go
use-
back and do, mind your own business and do something else.
Right.
Then the other tricky part is once, say it's everybody goes, oh yeah, that should be. The butters want it, the neighbors want it, the town wants it. Then the next thing that you have to deal with is like with Amelia. That was built with the idea it was always gonna be private. And when the developer built it, he was allowed concessions that, that's why the roads not as wide as a town road normally is, the sidewalks are in.
It wasn't,
street.
it was not supposed to have parking on it
Right,
originally.
yeah, no, fine, so now that's all changed, so now that's a public road. And so any improvements are gonna be on the town's nickel. And it's gonna be substantial, you got all the trees now and the curbing,
That's the next thing.
so, yeah, so,
It's always about money.
yeah. Yeah, so you can do anything with money.
Right.
So the winner was the developer,
Oh,
who sold more lots and is gone.
yeah,
Well, the other thing in the old days, they do also do, if it were a public road or something you could do during the planning process. Well, especially if it's an AR versus an A&R subdivision or whatever, you can do offsets like bike paths were, we used to take, people didn't do a bike path in the interior of a development, but they'd give money toward a bike path
Yeah.
somewhere else. It's like buying.
Well,
carbon
that raises
offsets.
an interesting question, is should we be involved if a developer is building a new road? Because now we get stuck with Amelia Drive.
Well, you would hope the process by which that went through the planning board
Planning board.
would accomplish the same thing.
Right.
You would hope.
That's really, if it's an AR in particular, that's where the public, everybody can weigh in on.
the guy I used to work for had the saying that used to drive me nuts. Hope is not a plan. So before we adjourn, there's no other business, before I send out this doodle, just give me a idea, is there particular days that are better or worse? So I can narrow down and don't have to put out, a whole month's calendar or whatever.
It's a nice day.
When that will decide.
I think the weather,
Like a Friday in the morning or something
Yeah.
like that. I'm just-
That's not, yeah, so
Picking up.
what's a general day that
Bill from me, with travel plans, May 1st and beyond.
And is there any particular day?
I would say more midweek personally.
For what?
I personally would say more midweek, but you know, if people are working in there could be a weekend, but it's,
Oh, yeah,
we're
travel
getting,
plans.
we're getting into kind of a rough time of the year for those that work, let's put
Yeah.
it that way, on the weekend, so. And a graduation.
Why don't you send
college
out
graduation to
Why don't
boot,
you send
so.
out a mixture of,
I'm going to, I just wanted to,
right,
I didn't want to have a 32-page list to choose.
Or this time of year, quite frankly, the sun sets later, it could start at a different hour or
Yeah.
something that would accommodate or something like that.
Yeah, so
Daytime work, you know, maybe.
mornings are better or afternoons are better? I'm gonna put a mixture of both. in.
I think mornings are better only because stuff happens. And if stuff happens in the morning, then somebody's afternoon is blown. Or if somebody has blocked it out for the morning,
All right, well, I'll put a mixture in there. Let's see what we come up with. Does anybody have anything to bring up?
Did you mention, want to talk about Alliance Lane?
Go right ahead.
I went up Alliance Lane the other day again. And there is one of the old public way monuments that was put in the 70s. That's there. You can go up the driveway and around the house and out. There is a set of stairs now. I assume that it's they're metal ones, so I assume they're one of the property owners up there that has a set of stairs.
Property owner actually, if I can interrupt, it's actually a property owner that lives across Eel Point Road that was responsible for those steps. Not an immediate,
Right,
waterfront owner.
exactly. Yeah, you have to go up his driveway, around his.
but it's from someone that's across the street.
On the other side of the.
On the other side of Eel Point,
Yeah.
used to pay for those steps. Now, I assume they still do. I don't know, but if they're there, they probably do, so.
Yeah.
It was two up Alliance Lane up the hill the other way.
Yeah, I know.
On the
That-
left,
I was there when they built those. And was there a month later when they washed away.
Right.
Which was unfortunate.
I think so. I think so. I think he's in charge of the metal stairs. Now, do they stay all winter? I think,
They pull them for the winter.
I'm not sure. I don't know.
So it seems to me, I mean, that's fine to let them do what they're doing,
Mhm.
but it would be nice if we had it on our list of public ways, whether it's convenient or ought to be opened up as a different issue.
Yeah.
But we ought to have it on our list,
Yeah.
it seems to me.
Yeah.
That's what I would like to see.
Yeah. Right.
Well, as long as that isn't taken away, as compared to, remember the big thing about Hinckley Lane that came up years ago, for the steps there were done privately, but then there was liability and, you know,
Although one of the things we discovered
it has a private
with-
way, actually.
with those the public way monuments that were put up in the 70s, that they weren't always accurate. But this one, I believe, is because it has the marker is a little different. It's not a land court marker, but it's,
And then a little,
anyway.
Okay.
Oh, good, so that.
I mean, it is a-
something-
Yeah,
so
exactly.
it is a
Down the
paper
road, we
road
can-
there, so yeah.
You can put that on.
May I bring up another item?
Sure.
So, on this year's town meeting warrant, there are two articles about, I think it's called School Street in Surfside. Are you familiar with that one? And I thought we maybe, I don't know, put these in the minutes or circulate them. And it looks like the town is going to clear title, so to speak, and do a deal where the small portion of this road near Western Avenue is gonna be, in a sense, leased or become the property of the adjacent parcel. I think with a lease coming back to the town for public access. Now, I'm not sure I have that right. I think that's
Right,
what's intended. And I think that's meant to avoid cars or other
exactly.
vehicles going all the way down to the water.
What article is this?
But this is, Articles 102 and, I forget which the other one is, there are two of them. So there's an acquisition and a disposition,
Right.
which they usually are.
There is a gate, or not a gate, there's a wire across it. They haven't mowed the way for years, but there is definitely a distinct way that goes down. So that,
And they'll have a
I have a lot
wonderful
of
beach easement
information on this.
on the lot
exactly.
that I think is gonna be getting the ownership
Right.
up near Western Avenue.
The, if I can comment on this, it's
Yeah.
because I have real estate experience with it. In fact, I dealt with the people that built the house next to the way.
Okay, good. Go ahead.
So I know that people used to drive down there to the beach quite often. And actually, it was one of those ways that was actually used by a lot of fishermen, and a lot of people
Exactly.
camping on the beach. And I think they closed it off when they opened up other ones as part of a compromise.
Mhm.
You can still walk down it,
Exactly.
but it was to keep people from specifically driving down through there. And I can't tell you the actual, how the compromise came. At one point, they tried to declare that the land next to it was unbuildable, and after a number of months, we proved that it was indeed buildable, so there. But
Ed, this is Lee. Wasn't that part of the original One Big Beach compromise?
I'm not even sure if it was the original or it evolved, because it seemed like it was at a later point than the originality of that.
Yeah, Lee, I don't think so. Most of those were down to the east of the Surfside Public Beach.
Right, this was,
Okay, this is, on western to the west of the public beach. And it's appearing, to my knowledge, for the first time where the town is taking an interest in trying to clarify what it's doing. The article says it's a select board article. I thought it might have been a planning board. I'm not sure where it came from. It would be interesting to find out where it came from, but we might
so-
circulate these to the committee and,
So, Bill, I think Rick's got a very good point. The former planning director, for the longest time, would come to a roads and right of way anytime they were proposing an acquisition and disposition to talk about whether or not there were any potential for pedestrian access. And it doesn't sound like that's happened this time.
it's a good policy.
so do we have a new real estate,
Yeah,
manager, the lady
Well-
here at the board meeting?
I saw at the last select board meeting.
Yeah.
And I forget what she was on there for, but anyhow, they introduced her as the new land
As the
special.
new land special.
And what is her name exactly?
Uh,
I think
I don't remember. I didn't recognize.
Is this
the name.
taking over for Ken Bogart?
Yes,
believe so.
yes,
There was no real.
It's Tracy McDonald.
Tracy McDonald.
Yeah, Tracy McDonald.
It was a title, he worked for it, right. She's good too.
Is it Tracy from before?
Tracy used to work for Von Dale and Hunter for years,
Yeah.
Her family owns.
paralegal.
Around the pond, the cow pond, they sold the land to the town for that.
Yeah, so her Rick, her birth name was Reed, and
She's Seaweed's daughter.
yeah, and as such,
Nice to get them in.
the Reeds owned a lot of land around Cow Pond.
Wonderful. Anyway, she's a new face and we ought to maybe ask her to join one of our committee meetings.
Yeah.
To become familiar with her,
Right.
talk to her as she gets into the job and develop a relationship.
Well, I mean, I'm gonna, Erica's on vacation right now, but, Ken used to be on the distribution list. And then when he went out on medical, Erica took over. And so she's currently on the distribution list, so my guess is she would prefer to get one less email.
Yep.
And roll it over to this new person, so. And that way we could invite her to participate. Do you have? You don't have this in a soft copy, right? I'll go dig it up to.
Do you-
what you
I
want, if
can send you those are PDF maps
Okay.
from the town election, the town annual meeting website. They have a PDF up there of every real estate article. So, and I'll be happy to send them.
Okay, so if you send this to me, I'll place it.
And those are just pages off the warrant.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
What I'll do is I'll scan, you know what, I'll scan what you gave me and put it in one PDF and send it.
Well, but anyway, you don't have to scan it. I'll get it to you shortly. Those two maps are easily.
Okay. All right, so that being said, is there anything else? No? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
That was Alan, seconded by
Rick.
Mr. Matt
Yeah.
Atherton.
Second.
And so by roll call, Alan Reinhardt,
Aye.
Rick Atherton,
Aye.
Ed Gillum,
Aye.
Phil
Smith.
Smith, not Phil the Hole, Phil Smith,
Aye.
Lee Saperstein,
Aye.
and Bill Greta. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Have a good evening.
Thank
All right,
you.
night, night.
Safe Travels home.
Thank you, Lee.
You're most welcome. I'll see what I can get done by the weekend.
Enjoy the old country for my wife.
We're having a good time.
All right, great. Take care.
Okay.
So Rick, are you in the process of campaigning or yard signs or
You
what?
know, I think everybody's campaigning about short-term rentals right now, right up through a town meeting day, and that all the oxygen is on that subject.
It certainly is.
And then we'll have a 2-week campaign before the election, or something. What is campaigning on Nantucket? Signs? Phone calls? Meeting with people?
It's hanging out at the Stop and Shop and,
Yeah.
and greeting me when I go to,
It used to be going to the dump, but you know, that's not the way.
oh, the
anymore.
dump, yeah.
Yeah, well, Matt Fee tells me he will never, ever go to the dump, no matter what the election calls. But I'm not Matt Fee. So I need to go to the dump